Hi, I'm John McCutcheon, and thank you for joining me here in my little music studio in beautiful Smoke Rise, Georgia. And I want to talk a little bit about a project that I'm involved in right now, recording the songs of Joe Hill. Now, Joe Hill would be known to some of you because Joan Baez sang the song, "I Dreamed I Saw Joe Hill Last Night at Woodstock" back in 1969, and that's probably where your familiarity with him ends. And that is why 36 albums into a 40-plus year career, I have decided to do probably the least commercially viable album of my career and remember Joe Hill's music 100 years after his death in 1915. Let's start at the beginning though. When I was 14 years old, I got my very first guitar. It was a beautiful red silver tone guitar that showed up at my doorstep from Mr. Sears and Mr. Roebuck, who at that point in our nation's history was bringing beautiful things to people's homes. And I got this guitar, and it was fabulous because it had this little sticker inside that I've never seen in any other musical instrument that said "Genuine American Plywood." You know, from the great old growth plywood forests of the Pacific Northwest. And I was of a family that this was a huge adornment to one's life. And so I knew that we didn't have the money to secure instruction in said silver tone. So I was on my own, and on that day, I schwinned my way down to the most fabulous building in our hometown, which was the Marathon County Public Library. And I checked out this book. And I don't mean just this title book, "I'm Coming Clean Here, America." I checked out this book on my 14th birthday, Woody Guthrie folk songs. I had no idea who Woody Guthrie was, but it had guitar chords and those little grids to show you where to put your fingers on the strings and on what frets, and I figured, great, this is a guitar instruction book. I could not have been more wrong. Like I said, I had no idea who Woody Guthrie was. I mean, I'd sung his songs in school. We had all sung his songs in school. But in school, they never tell you who writes the songs you sing. So it wasn't until I had gotten my way 3/4 of the way through this alphabetically ordered book that I discovered this was the guy in the T's who had written "This Land Is Your Land." But prior to that Guthrie alphabet took me through historical songs and love songs and children's songs and topical songs and funny songs and angry songs. And it was mind-blowing, not only to learn all these different songs and have this huge resource as a budding guitar player, but I was also a nascent writer. And this book was teaching me that this one guy, or this one guy, could write about anything for anybody. And one of the things I particularly loved was his historical songs. Stories that I, for some reason, was never taught in my history classes. About the things that happened at the Italian Hall in Calumet, Michigan, where a group of striking copper miners were having a Christmas party with their families, and he said, "Take a trip with me to 1913. Calumet, Michigan in the copper country. Take you to a place called Italian Hall. And the miners were having a big Christmas ball." And he painted pictures that took you right inside a song. "I'll take you through a door and up a high stair." And you were right there. There was singing and dancing and fun everywhere. "I'll let you shake hands with all the people you'll see. Watch the kids dance round the big Christmas tree." And this happened 50 miles from where I grew up, and I never heard about it. And but for this song, the kids in Calumet, Michigan, growing up there, wouldn't have never heard about it either. So I was fascinated with the way that songs talk to us about things we needed to know, about ourselves, about our history. And all these ways in which he would take melodies that already existed and write new words for them, whether it was, tell me what were their names, tell me what were their names, did you have a friend on the big Reuben James, or as I was walking that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway. These were all melodies that existed before, that Woody simply put new words to. And I thought he made it all up. But I couldn't have been more wrong. No, he learned it from a guy named Joe Hill. Remember the I Dreamed I Saw Joe Hill last night guy? Joe Hill was a Swedish immigrant to the U.S., came here in 1903, and like a lot of immigrants, got involved in the workforce and joined one of the nascent labor unions that was going on at the time. And he chose the Industrial Workers of the World, the IWW, the Wobblies they were called, though nobody really seems to know why. But the IWW was unique in two ways. Number one, they believed in industrial unionism. Today, the paradigm is trade unionism. If you work for, say, Delta well, Delta's not a union airline, so let's not talk about that. If you work for United Airlines, the pilots, the mechanics, the flight attendants, the desk clerks, they all belong to different unions, trade unions or craft unions. So one union can go out on strike and the other union can walk right across the picket line and keep the airlines working. The IWW believed in everybody belonging to one union, whether you worked in a coal mine, in a lumber yard, as a domestic, as a cotton mill worker, everybody belonged to the same union. So that was a radical idea. And the second thing is that they were a singing union. They were unmatched until probably the Civil Rights Movement in the way in which music was used to coalesce groups of people. And they gave us songs like, well, the most famous is a song which just turned 100 years old on January 15th. Solidarity forever, solidarity forever, solidarity forever, for the union makes us strong. It was written by Ralph Chaplin, who was one of the many famous songwriters for the IWW, but the most famous songwriter was Joe Hill. He had an uncanny knack for taking songs that were well known to people and writing new words to them, only words that made more sense. To quote my old friend Utah Phillips, probably his most famous song is long-haired preachers come out every night, trying to tell you what's wrong and what's right. But when asked about something to eat, they will answer with voices so sweet. You will eat by and by in that glorious land above the sky, way up high, work and pray, live on hay. You'll get pie in the sky when you die, that's a lie. If you work hard for family or wife, try to get something good in this life. You're a sinner and a bad man, they tell. When you die, you will surely go to hell. And he was not unique, but certainly a master in taking things like old hymns and turning the ethos right back on itself. So what Joe Hill was doing completely unwittingly was creating a template for future writers like Woody Guthrie, who would take a look at the Little Red Songbook that the IWW put out that had songs of Joe Hill and John Brill and Haywire, Mac McClintock and Ralph Chaplin, and T-Bone Slim, so many of the writers for the IWW, and this was their songbook. It was small enough it could fit in your pocket or in the front pocket of your overalls, and everybody would know the melodies, and then they would have the words, so everybody could sing all the words instead of just one or two people singing just a handful of the words. Joe was the ultimate utilitarian songwriter. He was absolutely not writing songs for the ages. He was writing songs for his fellow workers. He was writing songs that were apropos to this strike in this place at that time for these workers. And that was his job. And he took it very seriously. He wasn't thinking about writing a solidarity forever. He was thinking about writing for a particular incident. But in doing so, he created this template that was later used by people like Woody Guthrie and people like Pete Seeger and people like Bob Dylan, who took extant melodies and created new words for them. And there's a lot of people who would call that plagiarism. I like to think of it more as recycling. And in much the same way that the song We Shall Overcome was built on the shoulders of songs that came before it, it's given power from the past by the inclusion of something that's deep and historical, and contemporizing it so that music is shown to be not little museum pieces, but something that's dynamic and lives and grows throughout time and has relevance in people's lives today. I chose to do this album, Joe Hill's Last Will, not only to honor the fact that Joe Hill, who was executed by the state of Utah on November 19th, 1915, some say after a very questionable trial, putting it in historical context, it was, I think he was caught up in the huge anti-immigrant purges of the 19-teens, something that's being relived in this country and around the world right now. But I thought people ought to know something about our history in much the same way that I learned about what happened at the Italian Hall in 1913, or what happened on April 20th, 1914 at Ludlow, Colorado, that Woody Guthrie wrote a song about, or what happened to the Mexican immigrants who were killed in a plane crash in 1948 that nobody would know about but Woody Guthrie writing a song about it, or what happened on Christmas Eve 1914 that I learned from Woody Guthrie to write songs about. Joe Hill, though I never met him, was one of my mentors. Just hours before he died on November 19th, he was shot at dawn. Somewhere around 2 a.m., Joe wrote his very last piece of music, and he never put a melody to it. It was his last will and testament, and so I guess as a 100th anniversary present to him, I wrote a melody to it. My will is easy to decide, for there is nothing to divide. My kin don't need to fuss and moan. Moss does not cling to a rolling stone. My body, if I could choose, I would to ashes it reduce, then let the merry breezes blow my dust to where some flower grows. Perhaps some fading flower then would spring to life, bloom again. This is my last and final will. Good luck to all of you.